As a young person living, studying, and growing up in Mississauga, I respectfully acknowledge that the city is part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot nations. I honor the Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land for generations and recognize their enduring connection to it. I am grateful for the opportunity to live and learn here, and I commit to deepening my understanding of Indigenous history, culture, and contributions.
Watcha, thank you for joining us. My name is Sabrina Ashkeneb, and I am the Education Programs Assistant at the Gord Downie and Cheney Wajak Fund. Inspired by Cheney's story and Gord's call to build a better Canada, we aim to build cultural understanding and create a path towards reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So it's great to be here for a special DWF Live on Indigenous Veterans Day. Today we are honored to speak with Métis veteran Alex Maurice. Alex is a resident of Beauval, a small Métis community in Saskatchewan. Alex served in the infantry, completing several basic and advanced level courses within Canada, the US, Australia, and Cyprus. He quickly moved up the ranks, becoming a corporal within 18 months of service, master corporal by his third year, and sergeant after 6. Alex has trained soldiers in Wainwright, Alberta, and officer cadets in Gagetown, New Brunswick. He is a qualified paratrooper with the Canadian and American Jump Wings and has obtained his Ranger tab. He received the Queen's Silver and Golden Jubilee Medal, the Saskatchewan Centennial Medal, the United Nations Medal with 2 tours, the Peacekeeping Medal, and the Dumont Silver Medal. Alex, welcome, and miigwech for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I look forward to this interview and answering your questions. So anytime you want to start.
So yeah, before we jump into the questions and talk about Indigenous Veterans Day, can you tell us more about your community in Beauval?
Okay. Beauval is a little Métis village in northwestern Saskatchewan. It's, if you know where the province of Saskatchewan is, it's about 5 hours north of Saskatoon. It lies on the shores of the Beaver River, and it's a population of about 640 Métis. It's a Métis community, and right across the river is where they had the Beauval Indian Educational Center, and they closed that down in the 1990s. Both of my parents were residents of that residential school. My dad lived there for about 5 years, and then my mom lived there for 13 years because she had been orphaned as an infant from the Spanish flu. And so her grandma was a Denisotleni lady out of Dillon. And so she put up my mom in Beauval, and she lived there to when she turned 18, Mother Superior made her get married. She didn't even know who my dad was, and they had the marriage all lined up, and she met my dad at in church. And so that's where Beauval is. It's a nice little village. It has a northern store, part of the Northwest Company. It has a high school now up to grade 12. And so it's a nice little village, and that's where I was born, and that's where I was raised until I left to go to school, finish school, and then right out of high school, I worked for CP Rail for a while, and then I joined the military.
So how did your Métis identity shape your military service?
Well, you mentioned my receiving accelerated promotions. I ended up in the infantry because a friend of mine also joined. He's from Isle La Crosse, 80 kilometers north of Beauval. And I didn't know he had joined, and we met each other in Regina. And we had gone through the aptitude tests, and we had gone to Regina for the medicals and to meet with the officer in charge of that office. And I was told because I had high marks in my aptitude tests, I can take whatever trade I wanted. And so I said, okay, I'll think it overnight and I'll come back in the morning and I'll let you know. And then my friend went in. His name was Martin Corrigal, not was, it is Martin Corrigal. And he was in and out super fast. And he said, I'm in, I joined the infantry. And I said, what is that? And I said, well, it's Army. I said, okay. I went back in. And I remember the captain, he said, are you sure you want to be in infantry? I said, yeah. He said, well, they're going to call you Indian and they're going to call you a lot of names. I said, well, I guess I'll have to get used to it and uh, bite my tongue. But Martin, all he could take is infantry. I want to go with him. So I'll take infantry. So we ended up from Regina. We were flown to Nova Scotia, Cornwallis to start basic training in December 1973. And our training was supposed to start in January. They shut the Cornwallis down during the Christmas season. They sent the recruits home across Canada. And so we were there during Christmas, and Martin kept getting sick. And in the end, he was released before he even started recruit school because he had bleeding ulcers. So I ended up being in the infantry. And my having been raised in northwest Saskatchewan, growing up rather poor, I learned how to survive living off the land. I learned how to live in the bush. I know how to survive, and I know how to hunt, fish, and infantry is basically grunt work. And that's why I did good in the infantry because I loved the field. I hated the garrison. I hated the spit and shine. But throw me in a bush 4 weeks on end, and that's where I excelled. And the leaders in the infantry and my senior NCOs and the officers realized that I might be good for the infantry, so they kept on sending me on courses.
So, what can you tell us more about the role Indigenous people have played in military service in Canada?
Well, Indigenous soldiers were some of the best Canada and North America has ever had, right from the states into our country, Turtle Island. Indigenous people have been excellent warriors. In fact, Regina Rifles during landing of Juno Beach, most of them were comprised of Indigenous soldiers. And when they landed at Juno Beach, Regina Rifles went through their objective and beyond, and they had to be stopped because the Americans, the British, Australians, a lot of the allies, they couldn't even leave the beach. Regina Rifles comprised mainly of Aboriginal soldiers, Métis, and First Nations. It was, and when you hear people that give historic and accurate factual information, they said they were good soldiers because to them it was like hunting. And, albeit it was hunting human beings, but it was either the Germans and the Nazis or them. So they fought their way through. They fought like team units. And so the Indigenous soldiers let it be known right at the onset that they weren't a force to be put aside or disrespected. They showed from day one that they were good soldiers and they could fight and they could be part of a team and they excelled. And when you think about it, in World War II, Indigenous people weren't even allowed to vote. I have my wife's uncle is buried in Italy. I've represented Métis veterans around the globe at invitation of federal government, and the Métis politicians knew I was a Métis veteran, so they've sent me to Australia, not Australia, South Korea, Italy. I've been to Juno Beach 3 times, and you look at these soldiers, and you look at them and the names, and a lot of them were Indigenous soldiers that died for a country that didn't even allow them to vote. You got to put that in perspective. You're going in, putting your life on the line for a country where your ancestors were at before Columbus got lost, and they weren't even allowed to vote, and they died for that country. So a lot of soldiers did excellent. They went through World War II, and a lot of them came back because there was nothing at home and they weren't given the information to apply for funding that was provided to their non-Indigenous comrades to buy farmland, to go to school, to get into business development. They had to go out and fish and be trappers. And so when Korea started, a lot of them re-enlisted. We all know about Prince and how he was Canada's soldier, Indigenous soldier with a lot of military medals. And so he got burnt out in Korea. I was in 3rd Battalion PPCLI when he died, and some of my comrades were sent to Manitoba for his funeral and his goodbye with an honor guard. And Tommy Prince was a damn good soldier, and he was a leader. He made it to sergeant like I did, but he did it when bullets were flying. I did it during peacetime, and that's about it for now.
Yeah, so why is it important that we have Indigenous Veterans Day, and what does that mean to you?
Well, it's important we have Indigenous Veterans Day. It's taken quite a while for Indigenous veterans to receive that recognition, and I think it's high time Canada realizes that when you look at it, Indigenous had the most people that enlisted in terms of demographics. Cumberland House is a little village in northern Saskatchewan. They had so many men join World War II, and they were running out of males in Cumberland House. Canada made a decision. They stopped recruits from Cumberland House. So a lot of Canadian society doesn't know that. In terms of enlistees, and especially in the prairie provinces, we had a low population, but because we have had a warrior mentality, and we still do, we had the most people join out of any demographic group in Canada in World War II. And then when Indigenous Veterans Day was recognized, I thought it was high time that Canada realized that Indigenous people were excellent warriors, and that history should show and not hide the fact that Indigenous soldiers and warriors died for Canada when they weren't even allowed to vote. Put that into perspective. So I was really happy when they recognized Indigenous veterans.
So, in your journey as a veteran, how have your experiences shaped your views on reconciliation?
Reconciliation will never ever work until we have education amongst all Canadians, all immigrants, about how Indigenous people were here before Columbus got lost, and how society did that damnedest to make little white people out of brown people like me. You can't do it. I'll never be a white man. I'll always be me. A brown kid, a brown man.
So, how can communities and schools honor Indigenous veterans on this day?
I think they will, well, thankfully, I've traveled a bit in Canada and around the world, and a lot of our management teams and our teachers in our schools now have the wherewithal where they have assemblies. Indigenous veterans like myself were invited or are invited. In fact, I got invited to 2 or 3 events this year, but I started a new employment in Prince George, British Columbia. So I brought my uniform here, and I've already found out where I'll be going on November the 11th. But the high schools that have a little bit of knowledge about Indigenous veterans and Veterans Day invite us to go and speak. And then some of the children ask us good questions. So we give them honest answers. But the children and society in general has to know the horrors of war. I never seen actual battle. I seen death. I was a peacekeeper. I know people that were peacemakers. I have uncles that served in the war. I have relatives that died, both on my side and on my wife's side that are buried around the world. It's something the children and society needs, that we need to never forget that war should never happen again.
Very true. So, as a veteran and a community leader, what message would you like to pass on to the next generation of Indigenous youth about service and leadership?
Well, I would encourage our Indigenous youth to get into stay in school. I know a lot of our communities are suffering from mental and I guess in concert with addiction, so their mental and their health gets affected. And so, what I would encourage the youth, especially our Indigenous youth, is stay in school. Respect yourself, respect your fellow comrades in school, respect your teachers, respect your parents, respect your community. Stay in school, focus on something in your life, something that will interest you or might interest you. Become a contributor to society and carry on. And whatever you enter, whether it be military service, whether you want to be a dentist, whether you want to be a welder, a carpenter, whatever you want to be, do it with one simple thing: never ever quit. When things are hard, in my case, what I use is prayer. When I find something that's an obstacle that I think is hard or will be hard to overcome, I don't quit. I don't accept no or any. I never accept no. I like challenging. That's what I like to express to the youth.
So, I just want to thank you, Alex, and to everyone that tuned in today. You can head over to downeywenjack.ca/DWF Live for a list of our upcoming sessions and to look back at previous sessions too. So, miigwech, and I hope you have a good day.
You as well.